Hello everyone, I'm Laura Simeon from the Archives and History Committee of CSK BART, the Coretta Scott King Book Awards Roundtable of the American Library Association. Welcome to our ongoing oral history project. This oral history tribute is dedicated to Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, Professor Emerita at Ohio State University, former chair of the Coretta Scott King Book Awards jury, and recipient of the Coretta Scott King Virginia Hamilton Award for Lifetime Achievement. First, let me acknowledge the outstanding contributions of our Archives and History Committee members who bring diverse perspectives to our work. Barbara Jones-Clark, our chair, Doris Gebel, our secretary, Danielle Ponton, our ALA liaison, as well as our members Rita Arbach, Laura Simeon, Christina Vortia, and Susan Polos. Dr. Bishop recorded several videos for the National Public Media Literacy Initiative, Reading Rockets. In this clip, she introduces her renowned framework of mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors.
We need diverse books because we need books in which children can find themselves, see reflections of themselves. I wrote a piece, maybe in 1990 it was published, which I called Mirrors, Windows, and Sliding Glass Doors. And I think that's really why. Children need to see themselves reflected, but books can also be windows. And so you can look through and see other worlds and see how they match up or don't match up to your own. But the sliding glass door allows you to enter that world as well. And so that's the reason that the diversity needs to go both ways. I mean, it's not just children who have been underrepresented and marginalized who need these books. It's also the children who always find their mirrors in the books and therefore get an exaggerated sense of their own self-worth and a false sense of what the world is like, because it's becoming more and more colorful and diverse as time goes on. So I think that's why.
In 2021, the American Library Association's Association for Library Service to Children honored Dr. Bishop with the Children's Literature Lecture Award. Many notable individuals contributed to a celebration of her work. Here are a few words from noted award-winning author and illustrator and children's literature advocate, Grace Lin.
I grew up in an area where my family was one of the few marginalized people in the area. There were no Black people, no Latinos. I was the only minority student in my elementary school except for my sisters. During my childhood, I truly felt there was no one that looked like me anywhere. There was no one that looked like me in my school or my town. There was no one that looked like me on TV or in movies or in magazines. And there was no one that looked like me in books. But I hungered and longed for that. And that desire stayed with me so strongly that I have now dedicated my entire career to it. But as a child, I never knew what to name that desire. I never knew how to explain what I hungered for. I didn't know how to ask for it. But years later, after I published my first book, I heard someone use the metaphor of windows and mirrors. And when I heard it, it was like finding a treasure I hadn't even been looking for, or having a wish I didn't even know I had granted. Dr. Bishop's metaphor named and explained what I had been searching and wanting my whole childhood. At last, I had a way to explain to others what I was trying to do with my work, and it made all the difference. From my own parents, to the young children I see at school, to my colleagues, and even my own daughter, Dr. Bishop's metaphor of windows and mirrors, not to mention her essays and all her other illuminating work, made clear to so many what was wanted and needed in our world of children's literature. Thank you, Dr. Bishop, for giving me, and so many like me, the tools to build better books, a better children's community, and a better world for everyone.
You are so deeply entwined with Coretta Scott King and you have this long history with Dr. Bishop. And I was wondering if you could speak to the impact she's had on the CSK award and the ability of the jurors to just choose from so many excellent titles.
Well, one of the things I would hope that people who served on the Coretta Scott King jury, like I did, that they have read her scholarship and read her work. And of course, if you know about shadow and substance and those three typologies that she came up with, culturally conscious, the melting pot books like Snowy Day, and then the social conscious books. To me, the majority of the Coretta Scott King books are the culturally conscious books. And those are the ones that I think reflect the distinctiveness of the African-American experience. And they'll have names, for example, that are more common within the African-American community, like Mitra Nitra Brown, for example, her and her friend Zuri. You'll find language patterns that are more common within the African-American community, cultural traditions, for example. So I think her work in that sense has helped people to kind of understand the distinctiveness of what African-American children's literature is and how it has its particular features that make it stand out from other bodies of work. And I would also like to add too, this is something that I've discovered just from talking to different authors and illustrators. I also feel like, these authors, people like Patricia McKissick and Rita Williams Garcia, have made it known sometimes in their speeches or in communication with me how Dr. Bishop supported them behind the scenes and encouraged them to keep writing.
I was thinking it's unusual for theoretical frameworks from academia to end up being part of the sort of popular consciousness and a conversation, especially around children's literature. And it seems like The Mirrors, Windows, and Sliding Glass Doors really speaks to people and resonates in a fundamental way. And could you speak about that a little bit?
One of the reasons I think that metaphor has resonated with so many people is because, first of all, it's really accessible and easy to latch on to. I think a lot of times students mimic their advisors in terms of how they write. And one of the things I enjoyed about Dr. Bishop was that her writing was accessible. And I try to write in that way too. I try not to use a lot of jargon in my work because we, like me, like her, we both were former school teachers. We became teacher educators, college professors. And so ultimately it's important that people read our work. And if we use a lot of theoretical jargon and it's dense and difficult to get through, then it's not going to make a difference. So I think that metaphor is so accessible. And I think that is one of the reasons that people have embraced it the way they have. I think on the surface, it seems simple, but it's really not. It's complex in a lot of ways, because when you think about the aspects of our identity, some of them you can't see. For example, you probably don't know that I was born and raised a Seventh-day Adventist. So for me, Sunday worship is not something that I do. I go to church on Saturday. So that's a major part of who I am, but you wouldn't necessarily see it. And I know it's there. So to me, the metaphor is simple in a way, but then also complex in a way too. And I think it allows people to grasp it on the surface level, but then to also begin to really think more deeply and thoughtfully about what it means to have books be mirrors for children and to be windows for other children.
In 2013, Dr. Bishop sat down for an oral history interview with Evelyn Freeman, then professor and director of the College of Education's School of Teaching and Learning and dean of the Mansfield campus of Ohio State University.
In what ways do you generally identify yourself?
Well, I think given the time that I grew up, I tend to identify myself perhaps equally as Black and female, but I think the Black or African American tends to come first. I came of age when the issue of the day was not sexism or feminism. I mean, didn't mean that it didn't exist or that people weren't fighting it, but the issue of the day at the time was race and racial discrimination and equality and all of that. I mean, I graduated from high school about the time Rosa Parks was starting that boycott. So my femaleness, I guess, was shaped in a fairly traditional way. I mean, the expectation was you finished school, you went to college, you got married. I remember talking about having children, staying home until they went to school, and then going back to teaching, etc. So as I said, I think my primary identity really is as an African American. And how has that shaped my life? Well, I don't know. It's hard to articulate, I think. I mean, it's being Black in America is challenging, but it has changed, certainly. It's a lot better now than it was way back when I graduated from high school. There's a story there. When I graduated, I said another girl and I were at the top of the class, and we both needed money to go to school. We both wanted to go to school. And so we went downtown to one of the local 5 and 10 stores where my father had worked for a long time to see if we could get a summer job as a sales clerk. There had been in the paper an editorial about how my city, Pottsville, shares the pride of these two young Black women, who had graduated and da-da-da. And so we just knew that this would be a piece of cake. And we were told that the town just was not ready to hire Black girls behind the counter at that point. So we've come a long way. We've come a long way. There are other kinds of things. When we went to Westchester, there were 5 of us, young Black girls, who shared a room in the dorm, and that was fine. I mean, I made some lifelong friendships there, but we came to understand that it hadn't been too many years since we would not have been allowed to live on campus. So things have changed. Things have changed.
When I think about Dr. Bishop's work around windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors, I understood it and still understand it to represent everything I've ever experienced as both a reader and a writer, especially in my later writing career. I think about, I wrote a book called Each Kindness. And when I was writing it, it's about a girl who's unkind to another girl who has less material things than she does and was treated badly because of it. And I remember thinking about what Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop said about kids having both mirrors and windows, and the idea of the character of Maya being a mirror for someone and being a tragic mirror was something I didn't want to happen. So I wanted that person, when they saw that that mirror reflected back at them, to see someone who didn't quit, who didn't stop because of the way other people treated her. And I think I wouldn't have thought about my writing this way. And this is the only book that comes to mind if I hadn't read Dr. Bishop's work, and if I hadn't known what she was getting at and talking about us needing these positive reflections of ourselves. First of all, reflections of ourselves in general in literature, but reflections of ourselves that moved out into the bigger world. And then I talk about it all the time, and I always talk about it with citing Dr. Bishop, because I think it's really important. A lot of times people will talk about windows and mirrors, sometimes leave off the sliding glass doors and say, oh, I heard this. And that issue of this country not citing Black women is huge to me. So I can't think about windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors without adding Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop to it. And that's the way I talk about it all the time.
Absolutely. I've noticed that as well. I feel like it moved from this academic work that she wrote to just it's everywhere and people talk about it all the time and they don't always cite her, which is so important.
Mhm.
But I wondered if you have thoughts about why this framework has really caught on and I feel has spoken to so many different people so deeply.
I think Dr. Bishop's work has caught on, especially around windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors, is because it makes sense, right? Right? People have a parameter with by which they can understand how they're taking in literature, how they're producing literature, how kids are engaging with the literature. And I think also, again, going back to being able to see oneself in the bigger world through this literature. I think a lot of it wouldn't have happened without her work. I know publishing wouldn't have changed without her work. And the fact that she said, look, here are all these multicultural kids in the world. Where is the literature that where they can see themselves on the pages? And publishing had like an aha moment and said, because we had that moment in the 90s where white folks were writing about people of the global majority. And then you meet an author who had written a book you were really excited about, and then they did not look like you. And that message of, in order to be an author, you couldn't be a person of color came through with those white folks writing our literature. And the fact that Dr. Bishop was saying, no, we need own voices, right? It wasn't called that at the time, but we need people of color telling the stories of people of color so that kids of color and all kids and people of color and all people can see themselves in literature. So that was huge. I mean, we look at it now and for a lot of the young folks, it just is, right? You walk into a bookstore and you see all these different narratives. I mean, now we have the pushback going on, but you see all of these different narratives, and it's not even a question that you're not going to walk into a classroom library or a school library, public library, bookstore, and see someone who looks like you on the cover, but it's still so young, right? And of course now it's being threatened, but the fact that I feel like, yes, I know it was the CSK, it was the Poroberpe, it was all of these committees that were fighting for this, and it was Dr. Bishop's work, her academic work that trickled into this enormous change.
I was thinking Dr. Bishop has had this really profound impact on the ability of the CSK juries to pick such rich variety of literature. And I wondered if you have any particular memories of Dr. Bishop in relation to CSK breakfast or particular CSK books.
The thing I remember most about Dr. Bishop, it's in line with Robin Smith and Deb Taylor. Like they were always so kind to me at the breakfast, and our family's not church going, so our kids are a little rowdy sometimes, and they were always. She especially was always the first person to come up to me to greet the kids, to commend me on my work. I feel like she was the hand on the back of a lot of people choosing my work for CSK awards, along with Debbie Taylor and Robin Smith. But I just remember her being such a fixture. And in the 90s, it was kind of a small group of people that kept getting the CSK award. Like you knew the McKissicks were going to get it. You knew Virginia and Arnold were going to get it. You knew Leo and Diane Dillon were going to get the Illustrated Award. And fully deserving. And Walter D. Myers. And there were a lot of there were a lot more of us coming along, right? And there were a lot more. There was Angela Johnson, who became Rita Williams Garcia. So it was an interesting time to start to see that crew getting bigger and bigger and bigger of CSK recipients. And I do think that Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop had a huge part of that. Again, through her writings, through her speeches, and her reviews, and all the ways in which she was supporting young writers telling stories. And at that time, I was a young writer.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you wanted to say about her that I didn't ask you?
Well, one thing I love about her, she's a Buckeye like me. She's, in Columbus. And I think there was such a deep connection because she was at OSU for so many years. And, OSU's and OU are my home school, my family schools. And just the fact that I felt like we always had a connection beyond the literature, beyond all the change that she was making that was about Ohio. Um, and then I just feel like I think we don't give the flowers to the people who have created this kind of change that because of them we are. And so I'm so glad y'all are doing this. I'm so glad Dr. Bishop is getting her flowers because she really did change the world of children's literature. And I think a lot of people don't know that yet.
In this clip from Dr. Bishop's Reading Rockets video series, she explains the importance of using diverse books in classrooms throughout the school year.
Diversity in children's books is going to flourish when we are able to have it just accepted as a normal part of schooling and librarianing, if there's such a word. So one of the things that I would hope people do is to really integrate diverse literature into whatever it is they're doing. So when you want to read aloud, find a book by an African American, find a book by a Latino, read Pat Morra, read Walter Dean Myers, read out loud. And read those books. When people are doing their little research projects, I often look at the bibliography. There's this study of we use these books to do X. So I look at the end to see the bibliography, what were the books that they used. And so often there are no books from underrepresented groups that are a part of that project. And I think that's something. I think you have to also demand, if you will. People, publishers, marketers will respond to demand. So if parents go into Barnes & Noble and say, I want to see books about X, Y, and Z, or I want to see these specific books, I think they'll begin to show up. With the book clubs, I think they can certainly be encouraged to include more diversity in the selections that they offer the children. But basically, it's that business of being diligent about making sure that classroom libraries are diverse and that those books are not just pulled out during February or during whatever month we celebrate American Indians, say October. But that it's a part of all year round, any time. It's just a natural part of what happens in the classroom.
You served on 2 CSK Book Award committees that Dr. Bishop chaired. Could you share some of your experiences with her leadership of the committee?
Oh my goodness, that was just the crown jewel to be on the juries. And I was just over the moon when Dr. Bishop would be chairing them. And what I would say is leadership from Dr. Bishop made the work so easy. Yes, it was a lot of work. It was important work, and I was just thrilled to be a part of it. But her calm, professional approach to everything just made everything go very smoothly. I never heard her raise her voice. I never saw her stressed out. She may have been, but it never showed. And to me, that just emphasized how important it is as a leader to have those types of qualities, because it helps others who are around you to be comfortable, to be confident, to do the work that they are tasked with. Dr. Bishop was always prepared. She was always very tolerant of different opinions and different ideas. And she just had a way of putting everyone at ease so that we could focus on the task at hand. And that really was very, very important to me. And I certainly refer to that and try to model that in my career as well.
And I love how her framework of mirrors and windows and sliding glass doors, how it originated in academia and it was embraced by librarians, but it's spread, far beyond those worlds. I think it's really captured people's hearts and minds as a way of approaching young people's literature. So could you speak to the significance of this framework that she put forward?
One word that comes to mind is groundbreaking. In my work as a director, tasked with the professional development and the provision of quality library programs across the district, it was so very important to me personally and professionally that everything we did could be validated in terms of the benefit for students. And Dr. Bishop's framework, oh my goodness, mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. It was just, as I said, groundbreaking in terms of validating the importance of multicultural literature and multicultural experiences if we are going to help young people be confident learners, to be excited about their learning, to be engaged in their learning. They need to see themselves. They need to know that they are important and that what they bring to the table matters, and that the experiences that are surrounding them in an educational environment or even in the community at large, that those things are seen and that they have importance. And so that work was impactful, not just in the library program, but in working with my colleagues across the instructional division. I cannot tell you how many times that was cited in all of my work with my colleagues to help them. It didn't matter about the content area, but that concept, that construct of students being able to see themselves and have learning experiences that they could relate to was important across the board, across the learning spectrum. And so, yes, that impact was so important in collection development, in curriculum design, and in overall literacy programming.
Was there anything else you wanted to say that I didn't ask you?
Well, one of the things that I think is just so very significant is you asked me the question earlier about, the construct of the mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors and its relevance to the work of the CSK juries. When I think about that construct, while it may seem simple, it's very powerful. And I think of it as a picture frame around the work of the CSK committees. With the CSK work, the authors, the illustrators, they're prominent in the picture, but that construct kind of defines and gives border and gives meaning and purpose to what we're seeing in that photograph. And that photograph being those authors, those great books, and all of those great stories and illustrations that they create. But that picture frame helps us to focus. It focuses our attention on what's in that framework, in that picture frame. And I think that's really something that is enduring. And as I look around today, it is so very important that we continue to focus on the importance of the multicultural aspects of literature and why we need to have it prevail in our communities. And rightly so, the title that Dr. Bishop wears of Mother of Multicultural Children's Literature is apt, and it is correct, and it is so worthy of the great work that she has done throughout her career to promote multiculturalism and an awareness that it brings to children's and literature and literature for youth. It's a powerful thing. And I just applaud her. And as I said earlier, she has been a reference point for me throughout my professional career, and I'm sure of many others.
Thank you for joining us in honoring the brilliant insights and transformative impact of Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. Thank you to all the generous individuals and organizations who donated their time and materials to help make this project a reality. And most of all, thank you, Dr. Bishop, for your decades of scholarship and advocacy. You have touched countless lives, and our gratitude to you is boundless.